Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell.
All right, it's time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, Neal Smith. Neal, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here.
Well, you say that now. We'll see how you feel when the show's done.
I'm always having a good time. You know me. I'm cool.
That's a good thing. Well, I'll tell you, we often say, here on this show, every musician's journey starts somewhere. I know yours started at a young age in Akron before you end up moving to Phoenix. So how did you come to pick up the drumsticks to begin with?
It was just one of those things that when I was a kid in elementary school, late elementary, fifth, sixth grade, I wanted to play drums. And my mother was a big Glenn Miller fan from the swing era during the war. And she actually played trombone in the marching band. And that was the only instrument in the house. So we started off with that. I did not want to play it. I could never figure it out. A trombone to me was like me trying to learn, Mandarin Chinese. Forget about it. So it was a short-lived situation. I actually had a cousin that had a field snare drum, and he wanted to learn the snare drum, but then he sort of lost his interest in it. So they let me borrow it, and that's what started me on my journey. It took 2 years. By 1961, I finally bought a set of drums. Well, I got a set of drums for Christmas, but the 2 years before that, I was just taking private and lessons in school, learning everything on percussion. And then the University of Akron even took some private lessons there at the Conservatory of Music, and expanded into the xylophone and marimba and keyboards, and because they're really all truly percussion instruments. But that's where it started. And then I was in marching band at Perkins Junior High School and Buchtel High School in Akron, and did a little bit of amateur theater, Three Penny Opera and the Fantastics, and the band consisted of a drummer and a piano player. And I sort of got my feet wet with the mixture of music and theater, which obviously
paid off later.
Yeah, paid off later, as being one of the founding members of the Alice Cooper, the group. So there was a lot that happened early on. And so by the time I had the opportunity, my mother had visited some friends in Phoenix, Arizona in summer 63. She came home and said to my sister, Cindy Smith, and myself, do you want to move to Arizona? And I was 15 years old. I'm going, okay, I love music. I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up, but I still don't really. But when I grow up, I knew you had to be close to New York or Los Angeles to be in the game, to be in music. And there's other, great meccas of music in the United States, don't get me wrong. But at that time, in the 50s and early 60s, those were the big places to be. And of course, Arizona's not Los Angeles, but it's certainly close, and it was a good place to be. And boy, did I just lucked out, because right after that, not only was Duane Eddy and the Beach Boys, which I bought all their albums, and listening to all the pop music on the radio like I did even in the 50s, but now all of a sudden there was this whole British invasion that was happening, and Phoenix, Arizona was a test site for a lot of music for back in the day. If it didn't make it in the top 40 here, that was sort of the end of it. So we were exposed to a lot of music that most of the people in the rest of the country didn't hear. And there was a lot of great stuff that didn't make it, a lot of bands we were exposed to. So that was where it started. I got out here. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wanted to, be involved in music in high school. I went to Camelback High School, my last 2 years of high school, and was in the marching band and an orchestra, and met some friends that were in the orchestra and band, and we started a high school rock and roll band. And that was the Night Riders, and they changed the name to the Laser Beats. And we played, when we added a singer, it was an instrumental band at first, 5-piece instrumental band at Camelback High School. Then one of the students that went there was a really good singer. His name was Steve Hudson. And Steve joined the band. We changed the name to the Laser Beats. Goldfinger was just a new movie, and the laser was a big deal in Goldfinger, if you remember that far back. And so we changed the name to the Laser Beats, and finished high school, and everybody sort of went their separate way, and that band dissolved. But I had joined many other, not many, but other musicians. By the time I was in college, I was in a band called the Holy Grail, which was like a San Francisco band in the mid-'60s in the Tempe area, the college area of the valley here. And in 1967, that band went to San Francisco, and the Spiders became the Nazz. The Nazz went to Los Angeles. And I had gotten to know the Nazz really well because we all went to college together, Glendale Community College. And we were all art majors. I also was always fascinated by architecture and always fooled around with the idea of maybe becoming an architect or learning more about the arts that would you certainly could use in that field. But Dennis Dunaway was in my classes, Vincent Fournier, Alice, Glenn Buxton, and even their drummer John Spear. He and I were pretty good friends. So we shared a lot of classes together and came out here. And, left Phoenix. And like I said, I went to the Berkeley area around Frisco, and they went to Los Angeles. My band broke up, and shortly I moved down to LA, and they were my buddies. And I said, hey, I'm looking for a band, so you mind if I hang out with you guys? And that was now the fall of 1967, the Summer of Love. Mm-hmm. And so I moved in with them. While I was with them, John, their drummer, quit and went back to Phoenix. And I'm living with them, and they didn't have a drummer. And I was like looking for a band, and that was not the reason I was there. They were just being very cool and helping a friend out to, hang out in LA and find a band. So it was somewhere around September, October of 67. They asked me when John went back to Phoenix if I wanted to be in the band. And I said, sure. Let's see. I'm playing with my best friends, and they're a great band. And the big key for me was original material, all original material. That was a big deal for me. The Holy Grail hadn't gotten to that step yet of writing their own material. So I was very excited about the fact that they were doing the material. They were my best friends. And then 6 months later, we heard about Todd Rundgren and the Nazz in Philadelphia, and we had to change our name. So we decided on a lot of names flying around, and we decided, wow, we liked crazy names like The Who and Them. And there were a lot of bands out of England that just had very strange names. So we thought, well, maybe there was a name that popped up on a Ouija board, and that's a true story. I was there that night, and because I had played the Ouija board, and then Vince played the Ouija board, and we asked names and past lives. We were drinking and smoking and having a good time, and so we're doing that. And I went through a whole deal, and then Vince sat down and spelled out the name Alice Cooper on the Ouija board, and I'm going, we just thought it was strange that a guy would be a woman in her last life. But I mean, if you even talk about last lives, I mean, you could be a salamander. Who the heck knows? So at any rate, and my theory is I believe in everything and I believe in nothing. So somewhere in there, but it was fun, and that was all. Yeah. That was all it was about. And so that name popped up, and we were looking for a new name, and that's the one that stuck. And what was it, March 16th, I believe, Michael Bruce's birthday, 1968 now, we changed the name of the band Alice Cooper and did our first show in Santa Barbara, California with Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and Blue Cheer. And Nitty Gritty Dirt Band did say they were my first big fans. They loved us. And they said that we were a lot louder than Blue Cheer.
Well, there you go.
So that was how we got together. And then, we met Shep Gordon, our manager, and And the rest is kind of rock and roll history from there. And it was a lot of work. But the thing I liked about everybody, that we were not only they were writing original songs, because I had already started. I'd always played the drums, but I always had a guitar sitting somewhere close by. Sort of taught myself, but of course, it was a quantum leap when I'm playing with Glenn Buxton and Michael Bruce, and they're showing me chords all the time, and that was very cool. And so I started writing things, and I had some songs on the first couple of albums, and the work ethic. That was my point. Is that nobody was a slacker. Nobody. I mean, it's like you hear these superstar sport players, like Tom Brady and others. They're the first ones at the stadium, then they're the last ones to go home, and they work the hardest. That's what we did. Because every day we're either rehearsing, writing songs, playing a gig, or recording. And that formula, really, for the time that we were together, changed the name in 1968. Really, our last show that we did in South America in 1974. That work ethic just never ever stopped. We were music 24/7, and that's not an understatement whatsoever. And it was just like, and I call it many times, the party that never ended. And still, when we get together, that vibe. And of course, we lost Glenn Buxton, unfortunately. We're both from Akron, Ohio, so we had that bond, but we were very close, and we lost him in 1997, sorry. And and he's sorely missed, but we have a great time when Dennis, Michael, and Alice and I get together, and we frequently do.
Yeah. I'll tell you, to digress for a moment, Neal, who were the drummers that were the big influence on you when you first started playing, and then as your playing matured? What drummers did you kind of gravitate to?
Well, when I first started, there weren't, first my love for rock and roll, there weren't too many. I mean, there was Gene Krupa. I mean, for me, he's the king of drummers. And then there's other great ones through that era, without a doubt, through the swing era of the 50s. But along with the surf sound came Sandy Nelson and Let There Be Drums. And along with Dwayne Eddy, Sandy Nelson was a huge name in the early 60s. And I really thought what he was doing was really great, because I'm not a real drum solo guy, but I like taking all the ethnic drumming from all over the world, and then which was cinematic, that we'll talk about in a little while. But
I was going to say that showed up later.
Yeah, right. So, but I've always loved that what drumming does to build a mood and be very theatrical on its own. And in movies use it all the time. I mean, music like Dances with Wolves and Last of the Mohegans, amazing soundtracks, and there's a lot of Native American influenced drum. Of course, it's like on steroids in those movies, but it's still that's the genesis of that music. So I love that. And Sandy Nelson sort of did the same thing, and just took Gene Krupa a little bit farther. But of course, then the drummers just piled on with the British invasion, and even Ringo. I just thought that they were really cool because I dug the long hair, and I thought that, I mean, I was really into the Beach Boys, and I was getting kicked out of school because my hair was like the Beach Boys. So when I saw them take it the next step, and then of course the Stones, then they were even more rough than the Beatles, and so on and so forth, until the Who, and of course Keith Moon. I just go, he's just one of the most amazing people ever. I've met him a couple times in my lifetime, but see him live, there was just nothing like it. And I always say the biggest compliment for me is when I see a drummer, and Buddy Rich was the same thing. You see a drummer, all you can do is laugh. And Jimi Hendrix, when he was like in his prime, and I see him live, all you can do is laugh. You just go, how can anybody be that good?
Mm-hmm.
How can they write songs that good? How can they play on stage that good? how can they be so phenomenal? They mastered their instrument. I mean, it's just like, there's not many people that reach that level, but
Right.
I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of them, and I mean, even like I said, Ringo and Charlie Watts, but drummers like Cozy Powell, I thought he was a great drummer also, and of course Keith and John Bonham was a whole new dimension that sort of broke when we did. Of course, their album did just a little bit better than our first album, but Pretty's for You. But I was very, very into that sound that Jimmy Page was producing them at the time that they got out of John Bonham. And I mean, they talk about his playing, but geez, it was the sound was phenomenal. Nobody ever had been that present on a record before as Jimmy Page put John Bonham on those early, all of them. Actually, Jimmy McCartney from the Yardbirds also, I thought he was a great drummer. And back in those days, of course, Ginger Baker, every drummer had their own sound. It wasn't digital. You just have that one sound that in the 80s, it was the same Black Beauty snare drum, Ludwig Black Beauty snare drum on all the rock albums. And there was nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying that was one of the things that was so unique about the 80s, or not the 80s, but the 60s into the 70s, that every drummer, not only they were great, the ones that I was listening to, but also the fact that they had their own sound. It was very, very important. So tuning the drums. And I was lucky enough in '68 when Cream played at the Shrine Auditorium. I was sitting, I got to sit right behind Clapton's amp on stage and looking. I was like, less than 10 feet away from Ginger Baker behind Clapton's amp so nobody could see me. I actually had a cast on my leg, if you ever heard the story where Alice accidentally shot me in the foot. And so I had a cast on my leg to the knee, and it was, everybody was standing at the shrine, and Cream just played 2 sets. And second set, I was already pretty exhausted from standing. So our roadie that was actually from Pink Floyd, there's a lot of connections back in those days. Les Braden was a roadie for Pink Floyd. He jumped ship when they played in Los Angeles and joined us. But he knew all the roadies from the other bands. We had no money, so he would contact them when a band came to town. He knew all the roadies from Cream, and we got in to see the Cream for free.
Wow.
So
tell me this, Neal. What's the thing that is stuck with you the most from watching Ginger that night?
Again, the tuning of the drums. His drums just sounded phenomenal live. Where I was sitting, I was hearing the drums not through the PA system. I was hearing them right, like less than 10 feet away. And it was just the sound. And when he tuned them, and he had calfskin heads on all of his drums. These weren't the the newer plastic heads that, were even very popular by then. And a lot of the marching bands, and they were using those because obviously it rained in football games, and it was a weather. That's why I called them Weather King heads, the Remos. So yeah, most impressed me, but still, there was nothing trickery about Ginger Baker. He was just 100% pure talent. And I never heard anybody do, the quads, the 2 bass drums and the 2 sticks and the precision quads, and then just slow them down and speed them up. And I go, oh man, it was phenomenal. And I was very lucky to be that close and see him play that show. And it was a big inspiration. It was Keith Moon that got me to want double bass drums, and that was really early on. I think it was in 1968, around that same time, when I finally did get the double bass drums. One was a Rogers set, and the other was a Ludwig set, and I put them together and made one drum set.
There you go. I'll tell you, the Ginger's a prime example, from my perspective, of he had that huge jazz influence. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
But then he took it and did something new with it, combining the rock, attitude with the jazz style and precision on it to create something that, people hadn't seen or heard before. The other thing that always intrigues me is how big of an influence swing drummers like Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, what have you, had on that first generation of rock drummers. Not just the style, but that the flamboyancy in the performance itself, where it became watching the drummer was a show as well as hearing them.
Yeah, well, Krupa was doing everything that the black drummers were doing, but they didn't have the audience to become big superstars like Krupa. Krupa just did what they were doing, but I mean, he had his own style. And he was phenomenal, but they were doing the same soloing, but nobody had ever seen it. And then he's playing with, because he did play for Glenn Miller for a while. He got Benny Goodman, I think, also, but he played with a lot of the big bands. But he was made a star because they had such a huge audience, and everybody from the World War II era, the 40s, knew who Gene Krupa was. I mean, if they were into swing music at all, and he was the name. But it was no lie. It wasn't like hype or any of that BS. It was that guy could just play like thunder. I'm still amazed by the Gene Krupa story. I forget who plays Gene Krupa, but he was really good in the movie. Darn, I can't think of his name offhand.
Yeah, I can't either. So,
Krupa started it all, but I think again because of records and because of film, and as the media grew, I mean, he was a show. He was a 100% show, talented as could be, in a great show. And yeah, he inspired. I can't imagine too many drummers in the 50s and in the 60s that somehow weren't inspired by Gene Krupa.
Exactly. I'll tell you. You mentioned Alice accidentally shooting you in the foot. Tell that story.
Well, that was a jackrabbit. That was early. That was around the same time of as the Ouija board. When we were here, we were back for a while for the first couple of months of 1968. Came back to make some money because didn't make too much money in LA, but we could come back to Phoenix and get like 10 times for one night that we normally get in Los Angeles area. Get $50 there for one night, and here we can get like 500. So we came back to get some money in our bank account and to go back again, and that's when we moved to Topanga Canyon. But one night we had the brilliant idea, Mike Allen, Alice, and myself, to it was still Vince by then, but to go jackrabbit hunting at night. Just drive a car off the road because roads were you could just drive into the desert, get 322s, sit on the hood of a car, go like 5 miles an hour, just cruise very slowly across the desert, and we were told that when a jackrabbit sees you, it'll pop its head up in the air and look at you, and you can see its eyes glow. And so it happened, and I saw one. We were out there for a little while, and one jumped up, and I took a shot at it, and of course, whether it's a sound or whether I hit it, it was gone. And so I ran out there to see if I hit it, and I didn't, not even close. So while I was out there, I heard one of the guns go off, and then all of a sudden there's this horrendous pain in my right inside ankle bone. And it was, it felt like Babe Ruth, hit a home run off my ankle bone with a bat. And it was more of a, impact like that. But boy, it hurt like a mother. And so I had a boot on, and I took it off. I looked at it was, I couldn't see a hole in it. I could see blood come in, but it was a teeny tiny hole from 22. And so I ran back to the car, and I said, who the hell shot that? And Alice said, I did. And I went, well, you didn't, you shouldn't be sitting there with your finger in the trigger guard while somebody's downrange, but that's another story for another time. But so we ended up going to the hospital, and just coincidentally, my draft status went to 1A that day. So of course, it was a gunshot wound. It's late at night now, and a policeman has to come to the hospital to, when a gunshot wound was reported. And I told him that I was 1A that day, and I shot myself in the foot. And I graphically hopped up on one leg and aimed like I would hold a rifle down there, aimed at, which is really stupid, aimed at my ankle bone. If you can picture that, that's insane. But I hopped around and I stuck to that story. He said, no, if you're going to shoot yourself, you hold the gun up here and you shoot yourself down at the top of your foot. And I said, well, that's not what I did. And he looks over to Alice and he goes, you shot him, didn't you? And I was just going, we stuck to our story. We went out of there, and that's when I got the cast on my leg. And I didn't take it off to Topanga Canyon. We didn't have any money to remove it, so I had a big Bowie knife that was about, how does Crocodile Dundee?
Yeah.
He goes, that's no knife. This is a knife. Well, that's the knife that I used, and I cut it off with that and a hammer. But yeah, it was in the first show that we did when they did Gritty Dirt Band, the Blue Cheer, I had that cast on my foot. So, it was dead center on the inside of my left ankle bone. Can you imagine it? I mean, all Alice had to do was like raise the gun like a quarter of an inch. It could have hit me anywhere else in my body. So it was a tragic day. Yeah. But it was a real lucky day when you look at the whole.
Yeah. What the alternative could have been. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time, so then we on Good Friday, when we go back to Good Friday, 1968, we drive back to California to move into our Topanga house. That's when we had the horrendous van accident on the freeway, on the Los Angeles freeway, that flipped end over end 3 times and landed upside down. There were 8 of us in the van with all of our equipment, and really nobody had any major injuries. So by the first 6 months I was in the band, I'd been shot in a terrible car accident with them. So I felt like I was pretty much a member of the band by that.
Yeah, I'd say.
A hell of a what do they call it when you first join something, your initiation.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, that was your hazing.
Yeah, to say the least, yes.
Yeah. Well, tell me this: how did you guys cross paths with Frank Zappa?
Well, we became friends with the GTOs, and Miss Christine and Alice were really good buddies. And after we changed the name of the band, a couple weeks later, we just thought, what the heck? Let's start calling Vince Alice. He was cool. I mean, it could have been Glenn, could have been me, could have been Dennis, Michael, but this singer, that seems to make the most sense. We started calling Vince Alice, and so Miss Christine, there was kind of a change, a metamorphosis of Vince to Alice, and but the whole band was making that change, because it was like a totally blank slate for us, and we could make Alice Cooper be whatever it was. And so the GTOs were pretty much freaks. For some of Frank Zappa's freaks that he had in his corral, and we got to be good friends with them. And one thing led to another, and she found out we were looking for a record label, and she said, well, why don't you come over to Frank's house and audition for him, because you got some crazy music, and he might be the one guy that can really dig it and really get what you guys are doing. And so we did. She set an audition up for us at his house in the log cabin in Laurel Canyon. I guess it was Tom Mix's old house or something, like one of the old Western
cowboy
styles.
Guys.
Yeah, cowboy guys. And so we went there, and of course I don't know who was doing our social calendar at the time, but we were told I think 7 o'clock, and so we thought it was 7 o'clock in the morning. Went over there, set up all of our stuff in his basement, because there was a slider out there, and there was somebody let us in. We took stuff and we started tuning up the instruments. He comes out with a cup of coffee, and he goes, what the hell are you guys doing in my house at 7 o'clock in the morning? So, well, we're here for the audition for your new label. And he goes, it's 7 o'clock at night. And So he goes, all right, you know, you're already here. I've had my coffee. I'm getting up. I mean, the story's been told a million times, but it's true. It was, I mean, you know, we really didn't care. We were there, and I don't even know whether we had been to bed or whether, you know, we got up, because back in those days we used to pretty much stay up all night long, hunting jackrabbits sometimes. But we so we played through the songs, and he stopped and he goes, you know, went 3, 4, 5 songs, whatever it was, and he goes, "There's an all-guy band named Alice Cooper. Their singer's named Alice Cooper, and I like the music, and I still don't really get it. But the craziest thing is that you're from Phoenix, Arizona." He goes, "That I don't get at all." He goes, "But I want to sign you to the label." So, you know, whatever it was, you know, he wanted us, and he wanted us to sign with his manager, Herbie Cohen. But we said, I was really adamant. I think, you know, everybody else too, you know, we want our own manager. Everybody, every band, the Beatles, the Stones, Bob Dylan, everybody had their own manager that was, you know, they were the number one act, and that was what we wanted. And then, you know, we found Shep Gordon and Joe Greenberg, and and we worked together, and they, you know, put the deal together for us for Frank's company, Straight Records, and for Easy Action, and on into Love It to Death.
Yeah. Now, Pretty's for You. What do you recall about recording that album?
Well, both Pretty's for You and Easy Action were really Nas songs. Really, I mean, those were songs that the Nas had done and played, and I learned them and put my own style into the songs. And there may have been a couple. I think Return of the Spiders may have been a newer one on Easy Action, but it was just you know, recording. You know, we hadn't really broken that umbilical cord from the Nas to what was being created as Alice Cooper. Michael Bruce's songwriting was all of a sudden, after Easy Action, becoming really, really superb. Everybody's songwriting was changing, but after that, but most importantly, we needed a producer, and that was where Bob Ezrin came in then.
I was going to say, that's, you know, with Love It to Death, that's when you guys kind of hit your groove.
Yeah, I mean, we needed a producer. We physically and went through all the bands that were recording in the United States, who's having consistently hit after hit after hit, and we kept coming up with the Guess Who. We said, who's producing them? We found out it was a company called Nimbus 9 out of Canada, out of Toronto. And I said, well, we all agreed. Let's get an audition with Nimbus 9 to see if they want to produce our, you know, our third album. I mean, we were very lucky, to say the least, to get a third album. So, you know, the long story short, we played Max's Kansas City early September 1970. Bob Ezrin came down. He was a new guy. Jack Richardson hated us. Our reputation, it was like everybody else, every adult, you know, but they couldn't figure out. They actually thought I was a girl in a band. They said, this crazy band looks like girls. The drummer probably is a girl. And, you know, we killed chickens and did crazy things on stage. And Jack Richardson didn't want any part of that. And Bob Ezrin, so he says, and Bob Ezrin was a classical guy, and he loved classical music. And, you know, Bob still this day plays every instrument there is. And he said, I'll send him down to New York, and you know, he can go down there and it'll scare these guys will scare the hell out of him. He'll come back to Toronto with his tail between his legs, and that's the end of Alice Cooper. Never hear that again. And it was a 180. Bob loved us. Went back to Toronto and told Jack Richardson, this is a new wave of music, which was actually pretty true for the 70s. This is a whole new decade. And he said, either we're going to catch it at the beginning of it, or it's going to pass us by. And he talked him into it. And Jack came down along with Bob, and we did the pre-production, started on that. And, you know, that led to Love It to Death, Killer, and School's Out.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was it like when those songs started moving up the charts and all of a sudden you guys are on the radio? Do you remember the first time you heard I'm 18 on the radio, for example?
Well, you have to remember, when we did Pretty's for You, we already thought we were superstars. So I'm serious. We thought the Beatles are going to get this. It's going to be a hit record, and they'll really understand what's going on. So by the time it happened, I mean, it was great. It was nice, but we were already into our third album. And it's really just about freaking time that we have a hit. But when it actually happened, of course, it was exciting for us. And everybody, our friends and everybody at work for, on the radio requesting I'm 18 all the time. And it went to the top of the charts and was it CKLW, I guess, in Detroit, that, made I'm 18 a hit. I think it was the first station, but it grew throughout the Midwest from Cleveland to Detroit to Chicago.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go out on a limb here and say there were no introverts in the band.
That's an understatement. I mean, I always tell everybody that, we always felt like superstars, and it was like, if you see Daffy Duck on stage, and there's like 5 Daffy Ducks. I mean, everybody's doing everything they can to get the audience going. And believe me, we had standing ovations when we left Los Angeles. We were on the road for over a year, living out of hotels, and we said the first place that starts giving us standing ovations, that's where we'll move, and that was Detroit. And we didn't have a hit. We had albums, and our name was getting out there in the really in the sort of more of a cult thing than anything else, but in the underground. But we needed that hit to break through, and finally it happened. We were certainly excited, and we just wanted the momentum to keep going. Wanted the ability, So once Love It to Death went gold, and we had a hit record, then Warner Brothers, it was a struggle with them all along. They always thought Alice Cooper was a fluke. I mean, I can kind of understand that because of our reputation and everything. And it's still to this day, it's kind of sad after the Hall of Fame that, Alice Cooper, a lot of that real gritty stuff that we had in the beginning. And there were a lot of people that were afraid of this band. And that sort of wore away after the years. And that's the one thing that I kind of miss that. And even the Hall of Fame, it was almost like we were legitimate. And I never wanted to ever be legitimate as
anything with that.
I want to be the badass, beyond the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones on steroids in the United States. And it worked. And, Warner Brothers, every time I think we had a hit record, they were as shocked as anybody else.
Tell me this, Neal. Once you guys had the hit record and things are really taking off, what was the first thing you splurged on?
I really waited till after school's out before I really splurged on anything. And that was when I bought my Rolls Royce. I mean, I had enough money, we were renting a house, so we were just, that was not a big deal. We had we were under the same roof from 1968 to 1972, I believe, even maybe into 73. We were all had a band. We had a band house together. So that was really the very first thing that I ever bought was a color TV for my room in Pontiac, Michigan. That was the very first thing. And then after the royalties started coming in, because we were pretty crazy. We owed a lot of money going into the first couple of albums. So once that was all paid down and the money was actually there for us, it was the fall of 1972 when we were in the UK, and I bought the Rolls over there.
Well, that's a good choice for the first splurge.
I've always been a cruiser, not a speeder. I'm not into the hot rods. I know a lot of people, and that's cool. I mean, it's just not my thing. I love all of that stuff. I love the Ferraris, the Lamborghinis, Maseratis, but I'm just, I'm 6'3", and by the time I put any decent boots on, I'm 6'5". So most of all, I can't fit in those damn cars. And but I love them. I think they're great. I had an XKE one time. It was a convertible, so
headroom was not an issue.
Yeah, 1968 XKE, chocolate brown with a black convertible top. So I have had them, but I love the luxury cars. I mean, that's always, really been my thing. And they've changed. I still like the styles back in the 60s and 70s of those cars.
Yeah. Now, do you still have any of those cars?
No.
Any desire to track them down?
Well, I have a nice Mercedes SUV right now and a PT Cruiser, or the last PT Cruiser that they made, and so and then just a nice Subaru I bang around in when I need to go buy a 6-pack or something, and so I mean, or play golf. No, I mean, I've done it. I've had them, and I just don't like the technology of the new cars. I mean, if anything, maybe someday I may go back and buy one of the older model cars. I'm just not sure. My thing now is traveling. I have 3 houses: one in Phoenix, one in Connecticut, one in Finland. So I travel a lot, and I enjoy myself doing that. And it's not the same. Things change. When you go through life, and music changes, your desires, and I still love all those cars. It's just my biggest fleet was 5 cars, and the one thing I learned from that was there's always a car in the shop.
Exactly.
So if I cut it down, at least there's not a car in the shop all the time.
In all of your travels,
yeah,
what's the favorite place that you've been to?
Well, the 2 most favorite party places in the United States, in the North America, without a doubt, when the band was together, was Montreal and New Orleans, hands down. And in Europe, when we had the last tour, the party town there was in Berlin. I mean, Germany, any city, and we've been to Munich, any of the cities in Germany. I mean, anytime they bring out a 50-gallon barrel of beer and they tap it, because I saw these drains around the floors, and I go, what is somebody drink too much beer and they have to take it legally, just do it right here? What the hell is that all about? And then we had a big party over there for the Schools Out tour, and there's a big bench in the middle of this. On this floor, they take a hammer and they knock the stopper out, and then boom, they knock in the tap. And in the meantime, beer's flying everywhere. And I'm going, I get it now. It's for the beer that's spilled all over the place.
Not the recycled beer.
That's how the party started. So between that and the crazy adult shows that they had over there when we were over there, Europe knows how to party without a doubt.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the Killer album, what track on that album for you stands out the most, or are you most partial to?
Well, I'm really a Halo of Flies guy, man. I just think it's a phenomenal piece. That album is a great piece of every song, without a doubt. But Halo of Flies is just, you play a song, you get excited when you're playing it. That song makes us as excited playing it as what it sounds like when you hear it. And there's nowhere on the planet we play that song where the crowd does not stand up at the end for an ovation. I mean, it's great ending. It was a bunch of different ideas that we had for songs that never really came together. And even back in the late 60s, some of the outdoor concerts, I think the show that we did in Toronto, the Pop Festival up there, you can actually hear some of the intro. Michael Bruce is playing some of the intro to Halo of Flies on that. So, without a doubt, Halo of Flies is my favorite song on that album.
Yeah, no, I fully understand that. Yeah, Under My Wheels. Yeah, I've long said that, the folks writing Rocky Horror Picture Show listen to that track many times because to me, there's a definite influence.
Oh yeah, I think the whole Alice Cooper thing, the whole thing that was happening in the early 70s influenced that show, without a doubt, and that's okay. I mean, I still have people, guitar players, drummers, bass players, still come up to me to this day that were influenced by what we did then. Like we're talking about the influences in the 40s and the 50s that led up to the British invasion. and we did the same thing. The biggest compliment I can have still to this day is a drummer telling me that, Neal, I got into your music big time and I made it my career of life. And I'm just going, wow, that is, which is not surprising, because even when I write my new material, the new Killsmith songs, I always think about drummers. You know, I want everybody to enjoy my music, but when I get a compliment from a drummer, any musician, it's great, but drummers are very, very special, because they get when they get what I'm doing, that means a lot to me. It means a lot to me, because by this time of your life, the songs are almost like children to you. And so when somebody hears a song, because I'm trying to play what the song requires. And sometimes it's a little simpler than others, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it can get a little crazy, but I enjoy that. And I've had, even in Killsmith Goes West, the new CD, I had a chance to go back to some of the classic Western songs from the era of the 50s and 60s, like the Yellow Rose of Texas for the song Jukebox Rose. And then Big Wheels Rolling West, the big traveling snare drum, like it's, used on the, country hoedown songs. And so there's great music out there now, but nobody, there's a lot, the guitar players and keyboard players write songs. And believe me, when drummers write songs, there's things that are a little different that we do. And yeah. I hope that, and I hear it from people. They can hear the inspiration. They can hear those sort of things. And to me, that again, that's a great compliment.
Well, your work on $1 Billion Babies, the title track, that's one that I know you've got to have a lot of people telling you that your work on that song had a big impact on them.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the title track to the album that was 50 years ago this year. I can't believe it's 50 years ago. Was #1 in all the trade magazines, Billboard, Casebox, and Record World. Went to the top. We were the #1 band on the planet during 1973, and the song was pretty much a standard drum part through the whole song. But I've always liked the way Charlie Watts played the beginning, the intro of "Hey You, Get Off My Cloud." Very simple part, just some accents, and by himself, and then right into the song. And I always thought that was very, very cool. I mean, there's a lot of drum intros, but that was pretty cool. I wanted to do something, but I've always liked flams, and I use a lot of flams in like "Drive Me Nervous" on the "Love It to Death" album, and other songs too. And still to this day, I enjoy doing that. Some songs I'm recording soon have some nice flams in them. So I'm a rudimentary drummer, and I think that's important. It wasn't like one of these, somebody gets a set of drums and says, "I want to learn Stairway to Heaven." That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But I learned from the best rudimentary player from the planet. And, when I was studying drums back as a kid, 2 years solid on snare drum before I even sat down to a set of drums. So that $1 Billion Babies was just taking that kind of an idea and then kind of a tango dun 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 dun, dun in one of the hooks, and to make it work. And Bob, because it was, like I said, it was pretty straight, and I wanted to do something a little flashier on it. And he said, "Yeah, you can go ahead and do that, but it better be perfect all the way through." And it was. So yeah, it's the signature song for our signature album, and I'm very proud of it. And I still get compliments on it, and I've seen a couple of these, online shows where they talk about the 20 most famous drum intros in rock and roll, and $1 Billion Babies ain't there. And I have a Hawaiian good luck sign I can show them when I think about their choices. And there's nothing wrong with them. I just think that it's like the intro to School's Out. Glenn came up with that. That's signature. You cannot hear that song, hear those chords without knowing it's School's Out. $1 Billion Babies is the same thing. So thank you for mentioning that, Michael.
Well, I'll tell you, for the sake of time, I'm going to jump forward. here, because I want to make sure we get to Cinematic and obviously Killsmith, including the new album. The night of your induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, what was that like?
Well, it was bittersweet for me because Glenn wasn't there. And then two things that I don't like to make quick decisions. If I make important decisions, it's like I can tell everybody to F off, or I can try to understand what's really happening here and enjoy it. And that's what I had to do, because we were actually qualified before Glenn died to be in the Hall of Fame, but it never happened. And so now I had to look at it like, okay, there's a lot of fans out there around the world that stuck with us through. I mean, Alice's solo career is great. Dennis has had great stuff, and Michael. Everybody has had, great things on their own, and I'm always 100% behind everybody. But a lot of the fans have been fans of all of ours and the original band for many, many decades now, and even at that point in 2011. And so I had to look at it like this is really for them. We would be nothing, and I tell you, nothing without fans. And any band that thinks that they're bigger than their fans, they're lying out their butts, man, because that's not true. The fans make them, and I got it, and I understood it, and I dedicated that trophy to them. And that was the first thing that I saw, the first light that went on. The second one was when I started looking at all the bands that went in on the first draft. Then I got excited. It was the Beatles. It was the Stones. It was the Beach Boys. It was Elvis. All the biggest names in rock and roll history got in on the first draft. And I said, oh my God, okay, now this could be really cool. And I get very emotional.
Well, as you should.
Because
you're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I mean, I said the work ethic of this band and what we did, and the people that got us really understood us and weren't afraid of, what was going on stage. We know we're hanging Alice, we're cutting his head off, we're electrocuting him. It's another day of rock and roll, man. Come on. So, so now it was getting down to historically what was going to happen. And yeah, a lot of that did rub off over the years and time. But the real fans know what the band's all about, and the songs that got us there into the Hall of Fame. So that was when I said, okay, this could be really good, and I got very, very, very into it. And I'm an honest person. I said, there was a little bit of a negative when I first got it. Like, it's about time. Like everything else, it took time, and that's cool. I mean, once I really understood in my capability of taking away the negative and the positive for the people that have stood by us. And I mean, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions out there still that, at our age now, well, they're younger than us, so that gives them a little bit more longevity. But it was a very special night, and it was, having Steve Hunter come on stage with us. He was like the perfect person to play. He's been involved with Alice, and he played on, a couple of the group albums as well. And Steve's a great guy. We love him. And it was hard to find somebody to replace Glenn, but it was a great night, and we, dedicated everything to the fans in the GB.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, now that we jump forward, I'm going to jump back now about 10 years to Cinematic.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned earlier that, the different drum beats, sounds, pad, what have you, from around the world were an influence. Is that what drove you to start Cinematic, and how did that project come to be?
Well, Peter Catucci, who was a neighbor of mine in Connecticut, where I lived at that time, he he knew a mutual friend, and through that person contacted me that a friend of his in New York who played guitar. Peter plays bass guitar, great singer, songwriter, and he's played with a lot of famous rock people. And he, a friend of his, Robert, in New York, great guitar player, does very eclectic, tasteful jazz, smooth rock guitar playing, wanted to get together and needed a drummer, and asked if I was interested in joining them, because they were going to do a project, work on a project. They were going to call it Cinematic, and it was just 3 pieces, 3 of them, and just sit down, turn on the tape recorders, and jam. And the thing is, they wanted to use just hand percussion, tablas, Native American drums, African drums. And I happen to have quite a collection of those drums.
It just so happens.
As well as my rock collection. But so I said, yeah, let's get together. And that's how it started. We ended up doing two albums. And we had a great Rob Faboni, who was the engineer for Keith Richards. He worked with them as far as back as Exile on Main Street. He also lived in Weston, Connecticut, where we lived, where I lived at the time. And he was also a neighbor in the neighborhood. So he came over and did some amazing production. You could play that on a small speaker on your laptop or put it in a stadium, and that would sound phenomenal. That's how great the mixes were that he did on, and the mixing and the mastering on the Cinematic song. So yeah, I have them. They're available through at nealsmithrocks.com. And it's just kind of music, you have a glass of wine, kick back after a hard day of work, and just want to relax on the weekend. And it's a mixture of instrumentals and vocals, and both Robert and Peter sing on the album. And all I do, I just sit back and play all the percussion. Did a lot of percussion overdubs, and after that, I was writing some songs in real heavy metal vein. I started getting into one of the Rammstein from Germany. One of the, I think they're like their Mutter albums, like the Sgt. Pepper of the heavy metal albums. That's such a phenomenal album. I really got into that. I have a lot of songs I think I could do in this vein. By then, I have a pretty good collection of vintage guitars, and I was playing them. And we started putting down tracks at Peter's studio. That's how Killsmith started. It was really just Peter Catucci on bass, me on guitar, and a little bit of keyboards, and on drums, of course. And then we brought in some guest guitar players, and that sort of continued till Peter moved away after the Killsmith 2 album. He moved to Florida. And a guitar player that we know and love a lot, Rick Tedesco, who owns a very, very amazing guitar shop in Danbury, Connecticut. Brookfield, I think, is the town it's actually in. He's a great guitar player, has a great studio, and we did the Greenfire, Killsmith and Greenfire Empire album. Some of it was recorded in Peter Catucci's studio, but we finished it up there when Peter moved. And then the brand new album was totally done there. That's Killsmith Goes West. Yeah.
Now on that one, you've kind of taken a turn back to those Phoenix roots with that Western feel to it. So in that, it's kind of a simultaneous rock nod to previous years, but then also to country simultaneously. You got a couple tracks on there that kind of have that cowpunk feel to it, Rank and File, Jason the Scorchers, what have you. Mm-hmm. I find it to be real interesting. So on those songs, who were the artists 50s, 60s that were your big influences putting together Killsmith Goes West?
Well, on the PR that I put out, the press release, I was really into the songs like Big Bad John and The North to Alaska, you know, the novelty songs that were coming out that were really like Westerns, 16 tons. You know, they told a story. And Frankie Lane and Rawhide. I mean, you know, and the great theme songs from the TV shows and from movies. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I didn't really think about it. I had gone through a bad divorce in the end of the 70s, and by the 80s, 1980, that was pretty much it. I was had gone through a divorce. It took 2 years to settle. It took another 2 years to take care of everything. So it was a long, rough period for me. And I wrote a song called Coffee, Beer, and Borrowed Time. And it was sort of like, you know, you'd gone through some terrible things and you'd like to fix it, but it never will be fixed. And then you have to realize, all right, it's time for a new life, time to celebrate. And that's Coffee, Beer, and Borrowed Time. So that song was written a long time ago. And then in the 90s, I wrote a couple of other songs. Jukebox Rose was one of them, Pull It Out Smokin'. And, you know, these songs just started to come together. And Rick Tedesco and I were putting the songs down. I'd bring in ADATs, 16 tracks, me playing guitar and just electronic drums on them, maybe some keyboards and rough bass just to get started. And then we built the song from there. And we ended up with about 15 songs. So in the final analysis, I said, well, some of these really don't fit this. They're more really Killsmith songs, little harder edge and subject matter. So let's whittle it down to the 10 songs that we have here and really make those fit in and gel in this kind of outlaw Western kind of vein that I'm thinking for these songs. And that's what we did. And I needed to have a really crystal clear country guitar player, Alan Roth, who has played on a lot of classic country music over the years. He lives in Connecticut. He may live in New York, so we're pretty close to New York too, where his studio is. And he came in and did three songs for us. And then Gary, the fiddle player, came in, did 4 songs. It's amazing. Just added that touch. But it's not like current day. It's almost like, you know, if you see the outlaw Josie Wales, when they finally find the settlement, you know, and 10 Bears come down and tells them he's not going to wipe them out, that they settle there and they have a little party, you know, they have one fiddle playing. It almost has that vibe of the 1860s, 1870s. And I love it. I mean, I think there's a lot of inspiration in music that's historic in the United States. And I know there's people that play it. I'm certainly not a historian, but I didn't really give them any direction. I usually give a lot of direction when I have a player come in to play on one of my Killsmith projects. But I basically, you know, gave them carte blanche to just play what you hear. And I loved it. I loved everything that they did. Arlen was in the studio. Gary was away. We sent him the songs and we got him back. We just would flabbergasted how great they were. And that's how they mixed on the album. So we're really excited about it. And I have 2 songs, Big Wheels Rolling West, that I mentioned before. And what's the other one? One of the last songs I wrote was Sunsets of Gold. And, you know, I do the song on the School's Out album, Alma Mater, which is a little bit of a, you know, it's a kind of, I mean, it's like, you know, reminiscing back to your school years, even though we were still pretty young in the 70s. But, you know, when you, after 10 years of school or whatever, it seems like a lifetime when you're that age in your mid-20s. So it had a little emotion to it. And I think, you know, that was a, you know, that's a great part of what Alice Cooper did, is that it wasn't just one throbbing, you know, heavy metal beat pounding in the face all the time. dynamics are a huge thing for the original band. And I mean, Halo Flies is a perfect example that we just talked about. And I like to keep that in, because I think great music has to have dynamics. You know, as the saying goes, when everything screams, nothing screams. I might make the exception of AC/DC, but they're always great. But you know what I'm saying. So, and then "Tattooed Cowgirl" was one of the last songs I wrote as well. "Evil Wind" was another song that was written in the 90s. So you know, it just started to fall together. And I said, I've always, you know, loved the West, and I've always loved the history. You know, Arizona is the 48th state. You know, the last state on the main. I mean, that's like it was the last wild territory. It was right here where I'm sitting right now, and you know, that's freaking great, man. I mean, you know, two big things happened in 1912. The Titanic sank, bad news, and the you know, the Arizona territory was made into a state in 1912. So there's a lot of history. I mean, I love the Native American history around here. It's phenomenal with the stories, the tribes, and you know, in Mexico, Nogales, Santa Fe, all of these things. You know, I mentioned them in the in some of the songs. So it's kind of like Desperado on the Killer album, and Raped and Freezing on $1 Billion Babies. You know, a nod to where we're from, but on steroids on this album, and more Western than country, I'm happy to say. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with it, but I miss that sort of really old school Western vibe and storytelling in the music, and have that raw. Yeah, Frankie Lane was amazing. I mean, you know, the Rawhide. I mean, that's a classic song. When the Blues Brothers do it, you know, it's a freaking cool song. So
yeah, exactly. I was going to say, you know, for me, Neal, you know, it's the Marty Robbins, and those, you know, Big Iron, and all those, you know, songs. That's
another perfect example. Yeah, I didn't even think about him, but I mean, that's a great storytelling song, and even High Noon with James Stewart. You know.
Well, with those like Big Iron, for example, as you said, they're story songs, and the lyrics paint the picture for the listener. So you've got the story, but then you've got the music that basically acts like a soundtrack to the movie that's being created in your head from the lyrics.
Well, that's exactly what Tequila, Tamales, and a Woman. That's exactly what it is. Somebody, you know, shoots somebody that was cheating at cards in Nogales, and it was self-defense, but the hanging judge didn't buy it, so he's sentenced to be hung at dawn, and he's got a last request, and his last request is tequila, tamales, and a woman. And so the story is, you know, based around that. I have some, you know, Mexican percussion in there. I have a lot of fun with it, and it really is like a little bit of a soundtrack. If I had my druthers, I was just in Tucson, in the old movie set in old Tucson. I'd love to do a video of that song there, but that's not going to happen. But I'll figure something out, and we'll do something cool. But yeah, I have a picture in my head of these things when they come in, and Sunsets of Gold, the same thing. And all the songs on the album. And If Jesus Was a Gunfighter takes a historic character. Yeah, I know it's Easter. People might get upset, but I'm going, hey, what if Jesus would have been Wyatt Earp? You know, I mean, he doesn't kill anybody. He's Jesus. He can do whatever he wants. He has golden bullets, not silver bullets like the Lone Ranger. He has golden bullets, and he shoots the guns out of the outlaw's hand every time. Bam, he shoots a gun out of his hand. And then captures him. He's a savior of the West, saves the Wild West. So, and it's kind of my tip my hat to Dusty from ZZ Top. I kind of dedicate that song to him. And another band I love a lot, ZZ Top, and they opened for us on our last American tour, the Holiday Muscle of Love tour. And I would go out and watch them a lot, and I love that band. If I ever want to play in another kind of band, other than what we did as Alice Cooper, which I love, to death. We created a great, a whole great new genre of music. But ZZ Top would be I'd love to play with those guys. They get great band.
Yeah, no argument here. Well, tell me this, Neal. Is there anything? Obviously, there's a lot of stuff we just don't have time to get to. But is there anything that we've skipped over or missed that you'd want to make sure we wrap in here before we bring this one to a close?
Well, I know you've been running my website, nealsmithrocks.com, and it's Neal, boys and girls. It's not spelled wrong like Neil Young, and so many Neils out there. Spelled correctly, Neal, nealsmithrocks.com, and lots of good stuff. It's a brand new site. It's the same company that did Alice's site. They're a wonderful company, and you can get all my music CDs there, and soon we'll have downloads there as well. So the thing I like about it most is there's a place where you can come by and just say hi, and I always enjoy that and try to respond when I can to anybody that says hello. People tell their a great Alice Cooper story, and I love to hear it. And I try to, like I said, read and respond as much as I can, and working on. I'll be releasing more of the Killsmith Songs Goes West on YouTube in the near future, and always working on new music all the time. Like I said, there were songs we took off of this album, but is there a Killsmith Goes West 2 in the future? I don't know. I'm real comfortable with what we did and getting a tremendous response and all the Killsmith stuff. I'm getting this has been great, and I'm happy that people are enjoying it. It's a little bit different, but I still have the Pull It Out Smokin', the Evil Wind, and there's another one I've got in there that Pull It Out Smokin'. There's some hard rock songs in there.
I say there's some rockers.
Yeah, there's some rockers. So we're not totally taking off our rock hat at all. Those are always going to be there. I mean, that's in my DNA, and we can go explore some other great stuff, but there'll always be some killer rockers in there. So
you can still tell a story and paint a vivid picture, and while you're rocking out. That's
right. That's what it's all about. It's just trying to do something. I lost my baby, or all the things, and those are legitimate. Nothing wrong with that. But we try to, go find things that haven't really been talked about, or talk about it in a different way. And we have, like I said, we have 2 of the songs on YouTube right now. Neal Smith, Killsmith Goes West, and easy to find, and come by and tell me what you think. I know some people, they had a sad face. Oh, Neal's playing what? This ain't country, baby. I'll tell you that. And it never will be. But outlaw Western rock, yeah, I'll give it that nod.
That'll work. All right, Neal, we'll tell you what. I think that's a good point to bring this one to a close. So I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us here.
All right. No, it's been good, Michael. Thank you very much. Good conversation. Little history lesson, Alice Cooper rock and roll. And we always, there's a lot of stories out there, and it's up to you, the viewer, to figure out which one. Like I always said, it's like 5 witnesses in a car accident. There's going to be, and then 5 different policemen writing down 5 different stories. They're all a little bit different, but it's the same accident. That's what you get from us. And unfortunately, Glenn's point of view is no longer around. We love him and miss him, and always will. And appreciate the fans that feel the same way too.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that will bring this one to a close. Everybody, thank you for watching. Have a good night. This
has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time. For Music Night at the Majestic, this is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.